All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Conversations with Keslow Camera. My name is Brad Wilson. I am broadcasting from Los Angeles, California, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Greg Magadow, who runs our Atlanta office. And we have three amazing DPs with us today. We'll introduce each of them. First off is Dan Stoloff. If you want to wave your hand, Dan. Dan has been a DP for 30-something years. Born in Boston, his career began there before moving to New York, followed by Los Angeles, and then followed by a return to New York, where he now lives in Montauk. Some career highlights include the motion picture Miracle and television work, including The Americans, Suits, and Zoo. Next up is Neville Kidd, multiple award winner, including an Emmy for BBC's Sherlock, and whose additional credits include Umbrella Academy, Altered Carbon, Doctor Who, and Outlander. And Paul Summers, 30-year veteran of the film industry, whose credits include Empire, Electric Dreams, Bosch, and The Vampire Diaries. So thank you so very much for joining us today. We're excited to have this little conversation about Apple TV Plus's amazing stories. So I wanted to give a little backstory about that. So October 2017, Apple announced it picked up Amazing Stories based on the 1980s series of the same name. Keslow Camera's involvement happened in August of 2018. Production began under the code name Puget Sound in November of 2018, and you guys shot for 17 weeks, finishing around March of 2019. A few weeks after you guys wrapped, Apple went and publicly introduced Apple TV Plus on March 25th of 2019, with Steven Spielberg himself on hand to personally announce Amazing Stories on stage at the Steve Jobs Theater. And I wanted to mention something that Steven said at that launch event. He said, "We want to transport the audience with every episode. It's the universal human trait to search for meaning. So in these disconnected stories, we think the audience will find that one compelling narrative that will make the first season of Amazing Stories into a single thematic experience for them. And I hope for all of you too." And then the first episode, The Cellar, landed on Apple TV Plus 1 year later on Friday, March 6th. Subsequent episodes dropped each Friday thereafter, finishing on April 3rd with The Rift. And so I wanted to start asking you guys, how did you get attached to Amazing Stories? We'll start with Paul.
I had a relationship with one of the producers, Don Kurt, and he called me when he first got the job, and I was working on something else in Chicago, but it was too good to pass up. So.
And Neville?
I got a call from Chris Long. So I think maybe my work on Umbrella Academy had, got Universal interested. And Chris Long gave me a phone, and we got on really well. And next thing I know, I'm on a plane to Atlanta.
And we're actually hoping Chris will join us today. Dan, how did you get attached?
I got attached through Chris. Chris and I had just finished the finale of The Americans together. And this was basically Chris's next project moving forward. So he brought me along, and that's how we got started.
Oh, perfect. So you had worked with Chris. Have you guys ever worked with each other before?
No, this was the first time for all of us being together.
So talk to us a bit about pre-production. What was Apple like as far as what their requirements were and things like that, and how that played into camera choices? Maybe Dan.
Well, in terms of camera choices, they really left it up to us as long as the technical specs fulfilled their requirements, their finishing requirements. So we did get to explore a little bit of the first. My first episode, I used the Red, because at that point I would have preferred to use the Sony Venice. At that point, the Venice didn't have the firmware to overcrank enough.
For high frame rate. Okay.
Yeah. So we ended up with the Red, and it was we shot anamorphically also, so that was a factor in terms of full frame and what could deliver their resolution requirements.
What are their resolution requirements?
I don't know.
Some
I don't just
4K
know.
or something.
It was
Okay.
4K. I mean,
4K,
it's basically what everybody else says. You got to deliver in 4K.
Yeah, and it's the 16:9 punch-in, isn't it? Has to be 4K.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
that's where it got a little bit tricky. The idea of this punch-in that you hit the space bar and it goes full frame regardless of what aspect ratio you're shooting. And I think we shot 2.35, so that was a pretty substantial blow up to go to 16:9. And the Red was the only camera that could deliver at that resolution.
I mean, that's such a strange thing too, because it goes back to like the early days of TV where you had to frame for 4:3 but protect for 16:9. Do you remember that whole nightmare that we all went through?
Well, to be honest, 16:9 never occurred to me once while I was framing a shot. Just like back in the days of TV, we kind of designed it the way we wanted to design it, and if you want to punch in, you're bastardizing the image anyway. So watch it full screen the way it's intended.
So were all of the episodes shot 2:3:5?
No, they were all different.
Okay. So each one had its own unique look.
Yeah, we were allowed to basically, in prep, we were allowed to come up with whatever technical solution we wanted to fulfill whatever creative vision we had. And that was wonderful. And again, as long as we fulfilled their requirements for the blow up, we basically could do whatever we want. So it was really hell on Keslow, I can tell you that. I mean, different camera packages going out, different lenses going out, everything was different. There was never a repeat, if I'm not mistaken, of a package from one episode to the consecutive episode.
Well, and also we were doing so many double up days that, you know, you and I'd be shooting at the same time, or Neville and I'd be shooting at the same time. So there'd be two completely separate camera packages going out for weeks on end.
Yeah, but let's shout out to Tim Risch, who did an amazing job, and his head was ready to explode all the time, but he managed to handle it. I mean, it was not a task I would have wanted, but the prepping and the constant prepping and changing kept the camera department hustling big time.
Yeah, I spoke to Tim yesterday, and he really wanted to compliment all three of you for the way you handled and approached the pre-production and production aspect of it, and keeping everything on point throughout your entire episodes, considering how much overlap there was. And he really wanted to give you guys huge kudos to that.
I feel a bit guilty, kind of, we thrashed them a little bit. You know, three needy DPs all at the same time.
They survived. They did a good job.
It is, we were testing, you know, I'd be in prep and I'd want to do a day of testing. So I'd have to figure out how to get personnel from the unit that was shooting, and then another unit might have been doing double up. So it was really a logistical nightmare, but it worked.
So
we were given a good amount of prep by Apple. You know, that's the one thing I think as DPs we appreciated, the long prep time.
While we're talking about that, we got a question from the audience. Nicola Nada from YouTube is asking, how much were you collaborating on episodes as far as look, and was it very divided and split up? What do you think?
I think we collaborated together, but I think it was all separate animals.
You know, but Neville and I had a huge chunk of time where we kind of shared an office. So there'd be like an hour or two a day where we could bounce ideas off each other, which I really enjoyed, because usually there's only one of us on a show and you kind of feel alone a little bit, but it's nice to have somebody to collaborate with. And I really enjoyed having that hour or two a day where Neville and I could just bounce ideas off each other. That was fun.
You know, the other thing about it is that since each episode was really its own animal, I think the core of the question is, were we coming up with a look for the show? And the answer is no. We were coming up a look for each episode, but in no way did they need to relate to one another.
So they were like 5 independent movies almost that just happened to be part of the series.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Now, for Dan's first episode, which ended up airing last, which was The Rift, I remember Dan came in and we did a lot of testing. You and Tim were there. VFX was there. You guys did end up going with anamorphic. You went with the Hawk V lights for that episode, which was the only episode that went anamorphic. Just talk about your decision to go that route for that episode.
Well, the reason was really going back to early Spielberg and the anamorphic look that he achieved in some of his earlier movies like E.T. and Jaws, and essentially that was really the reason was homaging. And you know, we had tested all these lenses, and I brought we looked at the anamorphics. We liked the imperfections of them. We liked the messiness of them, and so We forfeited using the camera I would have preferred to use, which would have been the Venice at that point, and ended up using the red. No, nothing against red. It just wouldn't have been my first choice, but it did have the higher res. So.
And so you guys shot the Rift on red, and then the other episodes were shot on the Sony Venice, which it looks like Neville and Paul you picked up on. And then Dan, I think you shot the Cellar on the Venice, is that correct?
Correct. Okay.
So Neville, talk to us about the heat. I know there was a switch to Venice, and what lenses did you use?
Yeah, we went with the Zeiss Supremes, and I kind of wanted a kind of an immediacy to the filming, because it's about two young athletes that are kind of trying to make their way out of the city and try and make it. And I wanted it to feel like it had an energy. Camera never stopped moving. And I wanted to kind of take advantage of the fast stop of a Supreme. You know, I wanted to shoot it more or less fully open for the whole time. So respect to Tim, and my apologies, focus puller. But I think it kind of had a nice energy, and it came across with the Supremes. I think it was a great combination with the Supremes and the Venice.
And you were shooting full frame on the Venice, wide open at 1.5?
We were shooting full frame 6K, yeah.
Okay. Nice. And was it a lot of Steadicam? I noticed there was a lot of moving, especially to give that sort of disoriented feeling when she comes out of the, I'm going to be spoiling it for people, but she dies, and then she's sort of figuring out that she's dead and everyone else is not seeing her.
A lot of cranes, a lot of Steadicam, a lot of drones, a lot of, we used the A7 as well. We did a lot of running through the streets with A7s on a gimbal, kind of chasing after them. And I think we just threw everything at it. We also we had quite a lot of scenes where we were shooting like 90 frames. Savan, the director, wanted a lot of stuff to be ramped. When she finds out she's dead and she runs out the church, we shot that, I think it was like 90 frames on a red. And we'd jump cameras, but predominantly the whole thing was on the Venice with us.
Can I ask a question, Neville? The one shot that really sticks out for me, it's in the trailer, but it's that really wide angle shot where she comes out in the street and the camera sort of circles her. What lens was that? Yeah,
so we also shot 3D. We shot a 360 Pro 3D. So we had VFX got involved, and we patched in 8, it's a football camera, which I've got some stills of it. And we wanted her to show the shock of not being alive anymore.
So her just seeing everything.
She was in, she's now a ghost, essentially. So it was her living on, our world, but being dead. So she was kind of coming to terms with her kind of DNA being with all the living people. So I thought it'd be a great idea to have this insane unwrapped 360 camera that would show the reality of what she was feeling like. I think visually it was the nearest thing.
Walk through the technical, because I don't really understand the 360 camera. How that was that just a background plate?
So essentially, it's a spherical camera, so it's shooting like 12 cameras as like a football.
And was she holding it?
And I know Brian had it on a Steadicam.
Okay.
So what we did is we knew we were
cropped him out.
We cropped him out. We knew we'd paint him out, and I'll show you some stills, and it worked so well because it felt like your brain was exploding.
Yeah.
Which is what her character was doing, because she thought she was alive and she was dead. Remarkable. And you needed a nice little kind of visual gag to take you into that. Mm-hmm. She can now go through buildings, she can now go through cars, and she kind of plays on all the advantages of being a ghost.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's perfect. And Paul, you shot your episode Signs of Life also on the Venice with Supreme Primes, and there was some night work. Did you use some of the high ISO options in the Sony Venice?
Oh yeah, I mean that was the main reason I wanted to go with the Venice for that episode, because there's a whole sequence on the road, the car chase at night, and I had to light. It was at least a mile of that road.
Wow.
So if I wasn't at 2500 ASA on lenses that opened up to a 1.5, I mean, it was ridiculous already. It was 2 Musco lights. It was 220-foot condors. It was, for the tubes of death, for smoke on either side of the road. We had lights in the woods to, backlight the smoke to, give depth to the woods. It was an enormous lighting setup. Sadly, I mean, that's actually not the biggest lighting setup I've ever done at night, but it was formidable. Because there were all those running shots to begin with, and then there's the whole confrontation. Once everything stops, it became a lot easier, but all the driving stuff that we had at the beginning that was really time consuming, I had to light a huge stretch of road. And that the reason I had to use so many lights was that road, there were no street lights on it. So there was no base stop to work with. So it was a rural road, and obviously because I did Vampire Diaries, which was almost all at night, I've gotten very comfortable working at night, but that enormous distance really made things challenging.
Did you choose that road because there were no streetlights, or was there an option for you?
The no streetlights thing was not. I fought against that and lost because they wanted it to feel more rural than urban, and that was the impetus behind that. And as soon as they said that, I said, this is going to be expensive and big, and you're not going to like me when I put in this bid. But, that's what they wanted. So the reason we picked that road was it came down off of a rise, and then after the mile of driving, you had another rise that came up. So you're kind of in this little valley, and it just allowed us to just get better lighting angles. Because if we'd been, say it'd been on the crest of the hill, there would have been no way to get the lights in where you needed them.
Yeah.
So that's why we ended up with that specific road. And also because of the stunts, they wanted to have, it needed to be certain width, per the stunt department. It couldn't just be a 2-lane road. So we had to have a 4-lane road with a median, just for safety issues.
I mean, it looks great.
Thank you.
You pulled it off.
No, it looked fantastic.
There were 2 really challenging nights for sure. 2 really challenging nights. There was a lot going on. We had a Russian arm out there. We had, 3 camera bodies, 4 camera bodies. Yeah. A7s on the ground that, you're just hoping weren't going to get crushed. I don't think we crushed any. No, we didn't kill any cameras. Yeah, there was a lot going on.
So here's another question from YouTube, Ryan Griffith, and both Neville and Paul, you've mentioned it. Did the Sony A7 and the Sony Venice cut well together? Do you feel like they cut well together? Do you feel like it was pretty seamless?
They did. I think the thing is you've just got to get the good crew that are used to working with a smaller camera. We had a dedicated A7 crew who dealt with all our stuff for the heat, and she was fantastic. Unfortunately, I can't remember her name, but she did a fantastic job and took care of everything. And we gave the stuntmen the A7s because they were driving their cars round circles, and they were inside, and we wanted to have that feeling of things are sort of slightly going out of control. We gave the stuntmen the A7s, so they had to make sure that they were up and running and recording, so they didn't have to worry about anything.
And Paul?
I would say this: the A7's great for like a stunt sequence or just like a quick cut, but I would never want to have like a Venice and an A7 shooting a dramatic scene and saying that, yeah, they cut together seamlessly. But if you're using them as a crash camera or for if you're using it as part of a running sequence or that kind of thing, I feel like they cut together great.
Yeah, no, I agree. You wouldn't want to stand it. You want it as your B camera.
No.
Keep it as your F camera.
It's like back in the days when we had running rigs for the Steadicam, and we would all run around with 2 C's because they weighed so much less.
Yeah.
It's like that's the advantage is they're tiny, and if they do get run over by a car, it's not the end of the world. As opposed to if a Venice gets run over by the car, you kind of feel bad.
Yeah, but the last job I did with Chris Long, actually, we used the Fuji 100, the GFX,
Yeah, those are cool.
which is not that much bigger than an A7, and it's got the same sensor size. It's got a huge sensor, and we used the Supremes on it, and we used it in a driving sequence.
Oh, nice.
And you can cut it with, we're shooting with the LFs, and it works with an LF.
Oh, wow.
So there's another question for Neville. This one's from Brian Nordheim. He says, did you feel that the 360-degree camera shot that traveled down the street with her worked as well as you had anticipated?
Yeah, no, I think we had a few problems keeping Brian out of the picture. And I'm really pleased the way, I was worried early on, they were a little bit worried that they wouldn't be able to keep Brian out. But VFX were like, don't worry about it, we can get rid of him. I think you got that kind of feeling of your brain exploding as you're going into another world.
Shout out to Brian Nordheim. Hey, Brian.
But yeah, Brian's the star. Brian's one of the best handheld guys in the business. The
Yeah,
stuff
you guys lucked
he
out.
did on the heats, it was just,
He was our camera operator. He was great.
He was our A operator, yeah.
Yeah, you guys got really lucky by kind of snagging the Stranger Things crew that was just finishing up and kind of jumping right. You guys had a really good crew and solid crew going on.
So Dan, question for you. The Cellar, the initial episode that aired, you had 2 different time periods that you were dealing with instead of just one. So talk to us how you created 2 different looks for that.
Well, it was a combination of things, but I guess the guts of that, the answer to that question are the different lenses I used for the 1919 sequence or part of the episode. I used Cook Pancro vintage lenses, rehoused vintage lenses, because they were lower contrast, they were a little softer, a little bit more yellow. And then for the present day stuff, I used Leica Summilux for the contrast, the sharpness, the slightly cooler. And again, lighting wise, I tried to, for the present stuff, it was a lot more natural. It was the look was more natural. The past was a little more romanticized. I mean, we had the speakeasy scene with all the gaslight, and that gave it a little, a different quality. But I tried to sort of maintain that period quality throughout that part of the episode.
And as you watch it, do you feel like you evoked that sense?
I think so. I'm pretty pleased with the way that that it feels different. I feel like I didn't want to hit you over the head with it. I didn't want to go diffusion. I wanted it to be subtle but present, and I feel like we achieved that.
Perfect. And Neville, you've got some stills out, if you don't mind sharing with us, maybe some of the stuff from the heat with the car sequence. So there's a scene where there's 2 cars drifting around somebody, and that must have been very difficult to shoot. So
let me share my screen. Here we go. So let me just find, here we go, the heats. So there you go. You all seeing the picture?
Mm-hmm.
it's great.
Yep.
So this was underneath the freeway. This was the rather infamous freeway that went on fire years ago. Don't know if you remember in Atlanta, the whole freeway went up. So they'd remade the whole freeway. So it was perfect concrete. And basically I lit it as far as the eye could see in both directions. So I used a helium balloon in the center above all the cars that were spinning, doing all their stunts. And then far off into the distance, I just basically used sky panels and then little LED spotlights. And I put M90s at either end as a backlight. And there's a little point here where you can see there's a kind of red and light glow. I put sky panels all the way along there, and I kind of simulated traffic going back and forwards to give it a little bit of kind of realism.
With programming, you mean?
We put a board up there in the day, and he would put in some random moves of just traffic.
Right.
So basically everything you can see, all the tungsten lights on the perimeter, everything is ours. Except obviously when you see in the background, you've got street lights. And I thought we kind of tried a few different tones, and we kind of came up with this palette. And I think tungsten and the cyan kind of worked really well.
Mm.
Oh, it looks great.
And I wanted it to feel kind of slightly edgy, dangerous. They were sneaking out. Their parents, you know, the grandmother didn't want her to go out. So it had to feel a little bit alive and have an energy to it. There you can see a little bit the red and the white light down there.
Mhm.
And this is the A7, which is with the we gave stuntmen A7s to fly around with the cars, because you don't want to put any actors close by.
So is he shooting out the window? The stunt guy was shooting out the window?
He would people hanging out the window and with people standing in the middle, because the whole point is the cars try and hit people.
Wow.
So you just wanted to keep that kind of noise and kind of chaos. And then obviously when we came in to do the dialogue, we wrapped all the stunts, and that was all in separate.
Did you film that all in one night, or did you have to do a couple nights?
We filmed it all in one night. But it was great fun to film. And the 2500 worked really well, because I think it gave it a little bit of a texture. I think the Venice is such a, you know, the 6K, the resolution's phenomenal. So I think the 2500 just helps when you've got some smoke as well. It makes it a little bit more filmic.
Which aspect ratio did you shoot?
We shot 2:1, which was an Apple requirement for our episodes. And then this is the stuff, this is our team. Bob and Brian and Stefan are our 3 camera ops, and they did a fantastic job. And this was our Patriot electric car with a little small 10-foot Scorpio that was just brilliant. And we had that for the whole shoot. And we just ran around Atlanta and the racetracks. And it just saved us a huge amount of time. And it gave us all, you know, we could put the camera down low, and then we could be up behind them. And it just, the kind of shots you would spend forever doing, that you could just rattle off. And, you know, the big problem for us doing any kind of television is just keeping everything, you've got to complete your days. And the Patriot was phenomenal.
Were you all happy with the weather in Atlanta for your episodes? I noticed some of those, it looks very overcast and rainy.
Yeah, we got every kind of season available. And we did a spinning board when she goes back to where she died. Again, I wanted to keep emphasizing the shock that she was in, that she was dead. She couldn't do anything. She couldn't touch anybody. She was just frustrated. So we did a scene where she's rotating on the 360, the spinning board, and we put the camera on it. We put her on it, and we gave you a few different examples. That's her on it. And that's her kind of empty on her own, kind of desolate. And then that's a shot from the 360. And then that's a shot with her on it, where she's actually speaking to the camera at this point. So we broke the 4th wall, which I think as a ghost you're allowed to do.
That's perfect. Paul, Lori Snow out of the Atlanta office is asking, can you talk a bit about the filtration used on your episode? And how do you decide what to use and things like that?
You know, I go back and forth between like an 8th Black Pro Mist. I sometimes just wear that full time on a show, just because I feel like it helps just take the edge off of the crispness of digital. But I also sometimes use black satins, and you know, for beauty light on women, which really wasn't an issue on my episode. I you know, sometimes will, you know, throw in soft effects filters. But I think on this, I didn't have full-time diffusion filtration on this episode. I like it pretty crisp.
Did you use any diffusion or any filtration during the night scenes?
No, because one of the nice things about shooting in Atlanta is it's so humid there that
The air is almost has a natural diffusion
the way
to it.
that, like, when you backlight something at night in Atlanta, you instantly get this like wonderful dreamy texture to the air. And you know, street lights always have a little bit of a glow around them, and that's not that just comes from the humidity. I mean, there was once, and I'm just going to reference another show, we were doing another car flip on Vampire Diaries, and it was astonishing. The sun went down, and out of nowhere, ground fog just lifted off in this entire huge field that we were lighting. And that was just dumb luck. You know, I have no idea how effects would have done this, but you know, it's just a product of moisture in the air. You know, and you don't get that if you're shooting in Albuquerque or if you're shooting in LA, unless you're in Long Beach. You know, sometimes you get it in Chicago in the summertime. You know, sometimes you get it in New York in the summertime, but Atlanta, it feels like there's always just this lovely moisture in the air that just helps give you texture at night.
And Dan, talk to us about filtration on the cellar and then on the Rift. The cellar, you have the different time periods, and then the Rift, you have the anamorphic. Talk to us about what filters you use.
I didn't use diffusion. I don't think I ever did on either of these episodes. I mean, I do on occasion, but I felt in this case, I sort of let the lenses and I let the lighting do that work for me. Like, you know, if I wanted for the beautiful girl in the cellar, I would just light her softly and just try to give her a lot of fill and not rely on diffusion, but more rely on the quality of light.
And what about Neville? Did you use diffusion or?
Yeah, I used black pearlescence just to help take the edge off it. I usually kind of my default was usually a quarter or a half.
And then the episode Dynaman and the Volt, that was the last one with Robert Forrester, and you've got a nice shot of some of the lighting set up for him if you want to bring that up.
Sure, yeah, let me just share that with you guys. So let me just get my desktop here. So just going to select everything here. Okay, you should be seeing it.
Yeah.
So this is Brian and the Venice and the Supremes, and we're using Roscoe switch lights here with mole beams and 18Ks coming through the window, and it gave you this. So I wanted to kind of create again it's that fast lens fall off, which I think the Supremes do very well, and we had the Roscoe view on the windows, so we could control the darkness outside. You know, with the polarizer on the camera. And this is kind of like an early morning sunrise. They've just had a breakfast, and grandfather's come in.
Do you ever find that when you put a polarizer on the camera for those that it deadens the highlights? Were you fighting that at all, or the skin tone tends to get a little bit weird?
No, you keep an eye on it. Sometimes you get a kind of weird effect with the curtains. You know, You've just got to keep an eye on it. It can sometimes have a little conflict, but I'd say 99% of the time you're fine. And anytime there is a problem, you can just pull the curtain out of the way or whatever.
Right.
But this you can see the 18K coming in through behind him. You can just see the little light shaft over his shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem I had in Atlanta was all the power lines everywhere. I think it was a real baptism of fire of where you can get your 18Ks in.
Did you reference any of the original Amazing Stories from the 1980s? Any of you? Was that ever a consideration?
No.
No, I didn't. Yeah, I think we were trying to make something new.
But for me, that said, I think that the essence of Spielberg certainly found his way into a lot of the decisions that I made, and working for example on the Rift, Mark Mylod, the director, we came up with certain homage shots. The shot in Jaws where the camera tracks back and it sees the shark getting pulled out of the water. We did the same thing with the airplane getting pulled out of the water. The shot of the kid running towards the crash, we put the camera on the ground and pushed in like E.T. I mean, we had these sort of in the back of our minds. We had these Spielbergian ideas that we wanted to basically incorporate.
Neville, when I was watching Dynaman in the Vault, I kept thinking about E.T. It felt very
Yeah.
Alec Avio at points. It
It was
really did. I mean,
definitely-
right down to the look of the kid. I was like, oh my God, this, and you use smoke and all the Shafty stuff was
No,
very,
it's definitely
very
E.T.
E.T.
E.T. is one of my favorite films, and I
Wow.
think it's embedded in me, and I think that was my subconscious coming out and giving me a little tribute
Yeah.
of E.T. And I think we wanted that feel-good factor of Dino Man, the kind of the moments where E.T. emotionally delivers every time.
Right.
This sequence, that still frame that you just had on,
Yeah, if we could
was
chat, if you could bring that back up.
was a reference. There's other pictures that are better, but that's kind of a reference to ET as well. I use these lights, the whacker lights. They're construction lights, but they were really an affordable solution to doing a kind of wall of lights that would circle that I could photograph that looked really cool. But that idea came directly from that came from Close Encounters, actually, the scene with Truffaut at the end.
Yeah.
And then Chad, if you could bring up that shot of the crane picking up the plane. Dan was referencing that earlier.
Yes. Well, our particular camera move came up along the fuselage of the plane the same way the camera came up along the body of the shark. This photograph really just represents the setup, but the camera was actually on the other side of the bridge, very close to the plane.
Did you do anything to push the flariness of the Hawk V lights? Did you go there with those?
Yes, yeah, whenever possible. Whenever I could get a good example is towards the end when they meet at the train yard, and all the soldiers come out with their weapons with lights on them. I mean, every chance I could get the horizontal flare, I would exploit it. Yeah.
And did you shoot that 235, the Rift, the episode?
Yes.
All right, another question. This is from Jordan Tremmel via YouTube. Were there any obstacles with the stuntman acting as A7S camera operators too? So I guess that's going back to maybe the heat. Neville.
Yeah, we just wanted to make sure our stuntmen were familiar with using cameras, and they didn't have a problem trying to. One of the shots, I'd seen a YouTube clip of a guy putting an iPhone over we call it the bonnet, the hood of the car. Mm-hmm. And I asked the stunt guys if they could do the same. And they were like completely up for it, and they got some great shots. I mean, phenomenal shots. So they delivered everything.
They love to be involved. I mean,
yeah,
put a camera in a stuntman's hand, they're so happy and so excited and so enthused to do it.
Yeah.
Did any of you have any happy accidents on set where you were something, popped into your head and you're just like, let's try this, and it worked out, or anything like that?
The best accident we had was when at the end of the heat, and she kind of comes to the place where the car killed her. The lights were changing, and when she kissed her and she came to and she opened her eyes, the lights changed from red to green. And at first I was like, oh, I need to flag it off. And actually,
you're like, no, it's perfect.
It's actually perfect.
What about you, Paul? Anything happen in Signs of Life?
I don't remember any happy accidents. I got to be honest with you. I mean, we did a bunch of hand crank that ended up in the episode, and that is just inherently, whenever you use that, that's a happy accident, because you're cranking and then you cover the lens and you back wind, and sometimes you don't cover the lens and you back wind.
Which part did you use that on?
I mean, you see it. I think it's only in there like 3 or 4 times,
So,
but
like, jostling.
it gets very jarring, and you get double images, and it's so difficult to achieve that digitally that you just basically just burn through as much as you can until somebody says uncle, and then they look through, and sometimes if you get 5 seconds of gold, but you've shot 4 minutes of 35 millimeter film. But I've been doing, Michael Dinner and I both love hand crank, and I've used it on a lot of different shows.
Yeah.
They're a lot of fun. They're a lot of different fun. So that's kind of one of those, you know you're going to get some gold, but it's never, you can't really plan for it. You can't really, not with hand crank.
What about you, Dan? On the 2 episodes, anything that you had tried and you're like, well, I don't know if it's going to work, and it worked out great?
Not in that sense. I mean, I think we got really lucky with the weather. On the Rift, it's luck in retrospect, but during it was hell. I mean, it was ferociously raining that night. I mean, 14 hours of intense downpour. Video Village was under a foot of water. I mean, it was madness. But then when I look at it and I see the rain and the wind and hitting the lights and hitting the actors and the interaction, and it's fantastic. So I think that's just luck. And in television, we just plow forward. I mean, we need to keep on going to like Neville said, you got to make your day, and it doesn't matter the weather is what it is. You plow on through, and sometimes it helps the scene. And I think that in that particular case, with the drama happening, and they've got to get through the Rift, and the environment is exploding, and it's pouring rain, it was perfect. Couldn't have planned that. Couldn't really have. Well, we could have recreated it, but it would have taken probably another night of shooting to do it artificially. So yeah, that was just luck.
And talk to us about Apple's involvement in the show. Were they giving constant notes for your work? Any of you? Or at all?
You got nice kind words when they were looking at the rushes.
We got good words.
You got words of support.
Yeah, but it always ends up coming through the filter of either the director or a producer. It's like, you're never going to get a phone call from the head of Apple Studios saying, "Oh my God, the dailies yesterday looked great." Like that.
Yeah.
You're only going to get a phone call for something bad. I think in our business, no news is good news.
And I think the truth of it is that nobody's looking at the dailies, they're looking at stills. Well, I shouldn't say nobody because I don't know that. But my sense of it is that now, these days, we send stills out from every scene we shot, and it takes an executive 12 minutes to go through a day's work, or less, 3 minutes maybe. And so I think that they're looking at the stills, and the comment that I always got is the stills look great. Not the dailies look great or the camera work look great. It's the stills look great. So I think that's kind of an evolution that's happened since the digitization of our world.
Mm-hmm.
Did either of you have the chance to go and visit each other's sets while you were shooting?
I stopped by Dan's first episode just so I could introduce myself to the crew. I knew Tony Mara from 20 plus years ago when I was an electrician. I knew John Vecchio, the gaffer, because I'd done two movies with him as an electrician when he was a best boy. One of the Dolly Grips I knew really well. Actually, two of the Dolly Grips I knew really well. I know a bunch of the Atlanta crew, but there were, like, I didn't know Brian Nordheim, and I didn't know some of the people, and I just wanted Stefan. I just wanted to shake everybody's hand and introduce myself. So, just to open up a dialogue, because we were just flipping crew back and forth and figuring out the way everybody wanted to communicate and what was going to work the best. One thing they don't, when you become a DP, when you aspire to be a DP, the thing nobody tells you is how much management is involved. And and that's just something you develop systems over the course of your career, and figuring out effective ways to communicate with your 3 departments and with the production designer and with the costume designer, just so nothing ever gets lost in the mix, it's a really big part of your job. It's a really big part of your job. And a lot of times, you're managing up to your bosses, and you've given your guys information or your crew information, and it's their job to help manage you the same way it's your job to help manage them, to keep track of stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah, ask a quick question along crew management lines, because you guys had really long episodes, and they all had a certain amount of days of overlap. So there was always almost at least 2 episodes shooting at the same time, in which at some point you had to split off your crews, and which were also switching over equipment, cameras, lenses, filters, and stuff like that. What kind of challenge was that for you guys to have to, at some point in your episode, split your crew off and then also figure out which gear went where?
Yeah, it was definitely tricky, and I think we struck gold by Stranger Things had just finished. So we took the Stranger Things crew, who were phenomenal, and we kind of kept rolling. And I think a few times we had a little bit of a crossover, Paul, where you'd done a scene and you wanted to maintain a little bit of continuity of crew with some sets, and we worked it out between ourselves. Between the three of us, we just spoke about who needed which crew, and we're pretty flexible.
Luckily, we had a lot of depth. I mean, there was basically full-time second unit personnel available to us that were great. But like Paul had said, if there's a specific sequence and you're in the middle of it and it comes on your last 2 days and those are double up days, you're going to lose your guys. That you negotiate and you've come up with a solution that will work for everybody.
Yeah.
Tell us about your favorite scene from any episode and what you like about it. Dan.
God, that's a hard one because there are so many, but I'm just going to jump to one for a lighting reason, which was the speakeasy scene in the cellar. And I've always wanted to do period stuff. I've always wanted the challenge of lighting something without electricity. And this was a gaslight environment. We built all these LED-based, battery-powered, remote-controlled, all these little lanterns. And it was just so much fun to be in this sort of basement nightclub and to sort of sculpt a look. This is actually an exterior. This is not inside. But yeah, keep going. No, keep going. No. Anyway, that was it. No, that's it. The band playing, the jazz band playing. It felt like I was in the world of Degas. I mean, I was inspired by that and the footlighting of Degas' paintings, and I tried to capture that in this sequence. And I think that for me was a lot of fun and memorable. There you go. That's perfect example.
And you, Paul?
I think probably that the whole last sequence of my episode in front of the diner, just because there was so much going on, and it felt like it really landed emotionally. It felt like it all worked. Both the actresses just were wonderful, and yeah. I'd say that one. I didn't get to do period. It was and I feel like my episode was very different than the other four, because mine was definitely present day, and there wasn't a lot of, I don't know if nostalgia, well, some of the episodes nostalgia is the right word, but it just felt like tonally they all had a sense of wonder and hope to them, but mine, I don't know. The script felt very different than the other four.
Did you feel restricted by that in any way?
No, I mean, it's not like I was reading the other guy's scripts, so I had no idea necessarily. I would get daily stills and just be blown away by the work the other guys were doing, but it wasn't until I got to watch their episodes when the show came out that occurred to me. They all do feel like tonally very similar, but it just feels like mine had just a slightly just a different feel somehow. I don't know.
What about you, Neville? Favorite scene?
I think it was the car on the roof for Dynaman. That was fantastic, and the way we had to
tell us about how you got the car up there.
We got the car up there with a very large crane, and we had to do it partly on location and partly in the studio because of all the health and safety. We couldn't have a kid up on a roof. We had to have a stunt person. We had the blue screen combining with the reality with second unit running, and it was I think it worked because there was so many different moments all that had to be filmed.
How did you light that scene with? I mean, that's a pretty wide space you had to light.
I went with a huge big moonbox, and we made it with 4 big SkyPanel 360s, and we made it look with some heavy grid on it as well. And basically, with 2 large cranes, one for the moonbox and one for the car, side by side. I've got some pictures I can show you.
Yeah, please.
And but it was fantastic fun and very rewarding at the same time. So let me just get into.
It's a strong roof to put the car up there too.
Yeah. Here we go, Dynaman. So let me go through very quickly. I'll take you to this. So through the school. Here we go. Here we go. Here's the moonbox. So there's our 2 cranes, one for the car and one for our moonbox. And it just gave us a lovely kind of soft light for the whole thing, because we were there for 4 days. So you didn't have the time to move your lights around. So
the car wasn't actually resting on the roof. It was being suspended the entire shot.
It was being suspended the whole time.
Okay, got it.
Do you know what I mean? So here we're looking towards, and what I did is I wanted to kind of have an interactive light of the school, the kind of,
the prom,
the party going on. So there's all the kind of colored lights coming out so that you would connect the studio world to the real world by the interactive lighting.
How big a crane is that?
I think that's a 135, I think it is.
Uh-huh.
So there, that's your, and basically what I could do is I could spin it round and kind of backlights, on like a 180 axis.
Wow.
So that's the effect you got there. And then that's him putting his mask on, and that's the interactive light coming from the school kind of disco.
The Halloween party. So Lori Snow is asking from YouTube, did you have a choice on which episodes you would DP?
No.
No, we're given them.
And had you worked with the directors that you worked with on those particular episodes prior, or was this your first time with those directors? I guess Dan, you had worked with Chris.
I had worked with Chris, as I had mentioned. I had not worked with Mark Mylod. We did the Rift together, which was the first episode. No, we hadn't worked together. We both live in Brooklyn. We met for coffee one day and chatted, and we had a really similar, I think we had a really nice relationship. And and so that was my first time with him, and Chris and I have been through many battles together. So it was that was really nice to get back to work with Chris.
And what about you, Paul?
I knew Michael Dinner from Electric Dreams. He was the director, executive producer on that. I didn't get to work with him. John Lindley shot his episode on that show. But we, the film business is such a small community. We, got to hang out quite a bit on that show. So when he came in to be the director, I was really excited to get to work with him.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
And Neville?
No, first time with Susanna Fogel and Sylvain White, and they were fantastic to work with, and great new relationships.
So what are you all doing to keep the creative juices flowing during this quarantine?
Binge watching a lot of TV, a lot of movies.
Give us an example of something that you've really loved that you've watched in the last couple of weeks.
I love the amazing, the Marvelous Mrs. Maisel is fantastic. I'm loving it, and I think it's perfect for a pandemic to sort of take you away to another time, another world, and very funny. And David Mullen's done a fantastic job. It looks glorious.
And Dan, you watching
what
anything?
am I doing? I've been painting, which is great. It's just me and the canvas, and as much as I love collaboration, it's wonderful to take charge of something. And I find the process is not dissimilar from cinematography, design a painting and build it, and levels. And so that's keeping me that's keeping me sane. And I'm out in Montauk, so I do a lot of hiking and spend a lot of time outside. Yeah, you know, mountain biking and all that stuff, and trying to stay healthy, trying to be, you know, be ready for when the checkered flag falls, whenever that may be.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of TV needs to be shot.
I'm like Neville. I'm watching a lot of stuff. I'm really, the look of Westworld right now is just, it just blows me away. It looks so great. And then I binged the first 4 episodes of Mrs. America on Hulu, and that's got a great look. And Kate Blanchett and Tracy Ullman are just so great in that show. So, you know, it's weird where your inspirations come from doing what we do. So trying to build that bank back up.
And with that checkered flag hopefully coming down sooner than later, what do you think on-set work is going to be like as we all get back to this?
I think a lot of testing. I think,
in what way? Talk to us about that.
I think until there's a vaccine, I feel everybody just has to be tested every day. I think there'll be a kind of cleaning squads that will come in. Everything. I think our industry is going to change enormously.
Yeah.
And you know, we just have to make sure that everybody's safe and everybody's tested. And as we were discussing earlier, I think insurance companies are going to need to be happy that they can guarantee that, you know, their A-listing stars are not going to get ill.
Yeah, that's the truth of the matter. And I think it's such a moving target at this point. The idea that somebody's going to do a blood test on me every week, so, you know, to determine whether or not I can go back to work, saying it seems strange. I've also heard people saying that, you know, we would quarantine the crew and the cast so to prevent anybody from getting infected. But, you know, hey, listen, I love my crews, but I don't know if I love them for 24 hours a day for 5-6 months at a time.
And what does that mean? That you can't shoot on location? You got to shoot it all on a stage? I mean, I don't really have the imagination to see how this thing is going to work out, but every solution that I've heard, it doesn't make sense aside from a vaccine. I don't see it. I don't know.
Yeah. So, and you know, when you read the paper, and it changes every single day. You know, what you hear changes every single day.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and we'll hope for the best. And that's what I love about Amazing Stories is the hope. Each episode has that hope. There's something amazing that happens and a nice bright lining, silver lining for each episode. And I'm so very grateful for you guys in joining us today and for the wonderful conversation that we've had and to be a part of that great series. So thank you so very much for joining us. And thanks, Greg, for co-hosting with me, and wish you all the very best during this pandemic and hope everyone stays healthy and well. And we'll catch up with you hopefully in person soon. Take care.
Thanks, Brad.
Thanks.
Just a quick shout out to all of the team members on all the Keslow offices around North America for helping us get through this this giant undertaking of Amazing Stories. And it was one of the bigger shows that Atlanta had to endure. And I really want to give a special thanks to the Atlanta team, Phil, Emily, Jason, Shane, Phil, Mike, Megan, and our superstar, Lori Snow, marketing agent extraordinaire, who had to hold the reins while Emily Green was out on maternity leave. It was a huge undertaking, and those guys were all phenomenal. So thank you all.
And all the camera assistants, gaffers, camera operators, all your amazing team. It was such a great show to watch.
Yeah, no, the crew in Atlanta were phenomenal. They really were. You know, I was blown away with everything that we got from all our crew and all the equipment was brilliant.
Agreed.
It was an honor to be a part of it. Thank you guys so much again.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.